So we're all going to die. Someday. I don't want to scare anyone, especially now, but please understand me correctly. It's sad, but it's completely natural. People are born, live, and die. None of us can avoid this. Besides, you can't take anything material with you to the next world. At least nothing physical. That's actually why wills were invented. To create this video, I read a lot of different wills, and I have to say, sometimes the last wishes of the deceased bring tears to your eyes, and sometimes they make you smile. Disgusting things have also happened. Anyway, from the internet, I selected for you 10 wills and last wishes that definitely can't be called typical. I wonder what emotions they will evoke in you. Let's find out right now. My name is Sasha, and On Air is not a scientific show at all, and even despite the topic of this episode, it's still an entertainment show. Let's find out right now. Probably not many of you know who Mark Gruenwald is, but I guess everyone knows who Captain America is. Write in the comments if you actually know who Mark is before I tell you about him. You have 3 seconds. So, Mark Gruenwald is a man who worked as a writer on comics about Cap himself for 10 years. Besides that, at Marvel Comics, he also worked on many other projects, including as an artist on What If and The Incredible Hulk. But Gruenwald himself considered his greatest creation not the comics about Steve Rogers, as one might think, but the limited series about Squadron Supreme. Honestly, I'm not a big fan of Captain America. It feels a bit drawn out, and I'm not referring to the plot. Tony Stark? That's powerful. Gruenwald's last wish was to end up on the pages of his favorite work after his death. But not as a drawn character, more like literally. Well, like as literally as possible. And he succeeded. After his death, the screenwriter's body was cremated, and the ashes were mixed with ink, which was used to print the Squadron Supreme comic book series. All 12 parts of the comic were released as a single book, and in total there were 4,000 copies with the author's ink. Again, quite literally.
Mark remained true to his passion for comics. He truly became one with the story, blending himself with the very fiber of the book in his ultimate desire for uniqueness and his own kind of immortality.
Well, you can't argue with that. I mean about being one with something. When you truly love something, then, by the way, I don't know, maybe only magic can help here. Speaking of which, you've probably already heard about the next hero of today's episode. We're talking about a person who could free himself from any shackles. At the beginning of the 20th century, this man was the most famous magician and illusionist who left such a huge mark on culture that even today, even if you don't know what he looked like, I'm sure you've heard his name. Harry Houdini. By the way, the future escape artist was born as Eric Weiss, and he has Ukrainian roots. Harry Houdini's grandmother, whose name Eric later took for himself, was born and lived in the village of Yovra. Now it is called Storozhnitsia in the Zakarpattia region. I think all wonderful people come from Ukraine. So where are you from? Write in the comments. It's helpful for promoting the video, and I'm really interested to read them. Despite the fact that Houdini created illusions himself, he never deceived people.
A magician is just an actor. An actor who pretends to be a magician.
In fact, Harry Houdini was very famous, especially for exposing so-called mediums and spiritualists of his time. He despised those who used tricks and special effects to pretend they were contacting the spirits of the dead and to profit from the grief of their living friends and relatives.
What they call spiritualism is fraud from beginning to end. There are only 2 types of mediums. Those who are mentally deficient and should be observed by doctors, and those who are completely rational.
Frauds? At the same time, after the death of his mother, Houdini himself seriously began searching for real contacts with the spirits of the deceased. He even offered a reward to those mediums who could prove to him that they really had a connection with the afterlife. Given Houdini's experience as an illusionist, he repeatedly exposed fake spiritualists. None of them ever passed the great Houdini's test. Harry promised his wife that if there really was a way, let's say to make contact from the other side, he would definitely find it after his own death. Which in fact happened after Houdini met with his own followers. One might have thought it would be some deadly trick, but... The thing is, the illusionist really liked to demonstrate the strength of his abs, both on stage and in real life. And he really could withstand any blows, even from famous boxers of that time. But only when he was prepared for it. During a tour in Montreal, several students entered his dressing room, one of whom was the college boxing champion. He asked Harry if he could really withstand any blow to the stomach. Houdini replied yes, of course, after which the students suddenly delivered 3 blows to him. The great Houdini was not prepared for this and barely managed to stop the boy, saying that he needed to get ready, which he did, and then asked the boy to strike again. This time the magician withstood it without any problem, but from the previous blows he suffered a ruptured appendix. 3 years after this incident, Fleming discovered penicillin, but in 1926 it did not exist, so Harry Houdini could not be saved. The life path of the illusionist ended just before the celebration of Halloween. October 31st, 1926, quite mystical. 100 years after the birth of Houdini, his will was supposed to be made public, in which allegedly all the stage secrets of the artist would be revealed. In 1974, indeed, many people were waiting for the document to be made public. On April 6th of that same year, which is considered the birthday of Harry Houdini, many newspapers left space on their front pages specifically for the announcement about the will. But nothing appeared, not then, not afterwards, and no notary confirmed the existence of the will itself. By the way, this story is called Houdini's Last Trick. But there's something else. Remember, I said that Harry promised his wife he would contact her from the other side if he found a way to do it. So there's a continuation to this story. Houdin instructed his beloved Bez to hold a seance on the anniversary of his death to try to contact his spirit. He also left her a secret code that the medium was supposed to say during the seance as confirmation that it was really Houdin who made contact and not the medium using their own tricks. After the magician's death, his widow tried every year on October 31st to summon her husband's spirit with different mediums. She even promised $10,000 to anyone who could really do it and not turn out to be a fraud. However, all attempts were in vain. After 10 years, she held the last seance, but the great Harry Houdini never made contact with her. But from the other side, he never told her on which exact anniversary of his death the seance should be held. Sometimes, you just have to wait a little, like for example, the heroes of our next story. Wellington Bert, a wealthy lumber magnate from Michigan, died back in 1919 at the age of 87. According to his contemporaries, during his lifetime he was quite an unusual guy, a bit odd and eccentric. Well, at least you definitely couldn't call his will typical. Bert had a substantial fortune, mostly in the form of real estate, and it was expected that after the man's death, his family would count on all his property being divided among them in one way or another. But hell no! Well, more precisely, it would have been so, but with one tiny little but. The will stated that the estate could only pass to his descendants 21 years after the death of his last grandchild, who was alive at the time of Wellington's death. I told you the will is not typical. I guess at that moment all his grandchildren started worrying a bit about their health, since the will didn't specify anything about a natural death. Yes, boys, the money is almost yours. It's on the right. He is the ticket to the pit. More precisely, just in it. Bert also left his descendants an annual allowance ranging from $1,000 to $5,000 a year. Well, not just to his descendants, also to the cook, the housekeeper, and the coachman. Each of them gets $1,000 a year. The secretary was left $4,000, more than some of his own children received. Of course, it's not the millionaire's life the family was counting on, but it is what it is. At the time, it was a significant sum. However, Berta seemed to have her own favorites. To one of his sons, he left a whole $30,000 a year, but to one of his daughters, he didn't leave anything at all. Something tells me that overall, Wellington didn't really love his family that much. Sorry, Bertie, if I'm wrong, I don't know where to look, but that's just the impression I get. In short, the last grandson who was born during Wellington's lifetime died in 1989. Already at a respectable age, as you might guess, he died. By the way, that's the year I was born. Numerologists, write in the comments what this means. It definitely means something. The 21-year countdown after the death of the last grandchild ended in 2010. As a result, 12 people became the heirs to Wellington Bert's $110 million. It's probably strange to know that there are huge fortunes in the family, but most likely you won't get them. I wouldn't be surprised if this really messed with some of the descendants' minds. 30 of them, including the magnate's children and grandchildren, were disinherited. Most of them because they died before the conditions of the will were fulfilled. Well, it happens. After all, it was Bert who earned that money, so only he could decide to whom, how, and when to pass it on. Even after his own death, it's his business. This isn't like being buried under a pile of chips by chance. By the way, about that. Admit it, among all the chips, visually Pringles stand out the most. And no, this isn't an ad. I tried to be as mindful of my health as possible, and if anything, Pringles are definitely not healthy. Still, you immediately recognize those tubes on store shelves. They don't look like anything else, except for other tubes of course, but come on, they're all made to highlight the uniqueness of the original. I'm talking specifically about the chips. Well, what won't you do for a video? The packaging is actually pretty cool, so cool that some people don't even mind being buried in it. On May 4th, 2008, in Cincinnati, United States of America, Frederick Bauer, who actually developed the Pringles chip packaging system, passed away. Bauer lived quite a long life, so of course he had other inventions to his name as well. But out of all of them, he was most proud of the packaging he patented in 1966, which we know today as the Pringles chip can. He was so proud that the inventor's final wish was actually to be cremated and buried in one of these cans. An unusual place indeed. But who am I to judge when in the summer I walk around the street in a turquoise coat hoping to catch inspiration for a new song? Music, you see, like any kind of creativity, requires sacrifice. By the way, about that. There once lived in the 19th century in Medford, Massachusetts, United States of America, a man named Solomon Sanborn. Well, actually, until he died in 1871, but that's not where the man's story ends. Solomon bequeathed his body to science. There was nothing unusual about that. At that time, it was a common practice. What's really interesting is that he didn't bequeath his entire body to science. The arts, in the form of music, also received a little bit of Solomon. Literally. I warn you, it's going to get a bit creepy next. If you're not ready for creepiness, you can skip ahead a bit. There's going to be a really cute story there, by the way. So Solomon, he bequeathed his skin to make 2 drums. Yes, he said, make drums out of my skin. And the drums themselves were supposed to be given to his friend, a local drummer, and not just like that, but on the condition that he promised every year on June 17th at dawn to go to Bunker Hill and play Yankee Doodle Dandy on them to commemorate the anniversary of the famous Revolutionary Battle. During his life, Solomon was a true patriot and was very proud that Massachusetts took part in the revolutionary struggle. So in a way, a man's love for music and his homeland resulted in such a will. If I were the friend, I wouldn't promise anything. That's quite a gift, honestly. I'm not sure. A couple of bucks and a nicely handwritten letter on paper would be enough, please. And drums made from your own skin, in my personal opinion, friends, are more likely a way to make your friend mentally ill than happy. Something like that. Although whoever has the mustache makes the rules. By the way, about that. Henry Batt from Brixton died in 1862. And that's all that can be said about him today. Dude hated mustaches. Although theoretically maybe he did like mustaches, but his son, not so much. Henry lived in the 19th century and owned an impressive estate. We can't really assess how impressive it looked now since I couldn't find any photos, but the value of this property in 1862 just for a moment was £200,000 sterling. That's a lot. Today, that's equivalent to millions, maybe even tens of millions. And all this property was supposed to go to his son, Henry, with one small but rather hairy condition.
If my son grows a mustache, then the agreement set out in this document in his favor will be void.
Yes, you understood everything correctly. Shave your face and you own a huge fortune. If you don't shave your face, you're left without a house, without a penny, without a tooth, and that's all there is to it. I'm turning now to my son. Oh wait, I don't have a son. If you ever exist, and you're watching this, child, know this. Do whatever you want, your father still doesn't have any money. And anyway, money isn't the most important thing, by the way, about that. The job with John Bauman, a Vermont, United States of America leatherworker, was really good. Everything was fine. But when it came to family matters, things weren't so rosy. In 1879, his second daughter died, and a year later, his wife also passed away. His first daughter had passed away at a young age. Bauman spared no expense and hired 100 workers to build a marble memorial and mausoleum in the Greek style for his wife and daughters. The man really wanted his late wife and daughters not to be forgotten, and he succeeded. This memorial still stands today. In 1891, John himself passed away, leaving behind an estate with 21 rooms. Bauman had a peculiar will, as he was captivated by spiritualism and had a firm belief in life after death. As we learned from the Houdini story, this was a common occurrence during that period. Moreover, he was convinced that sooner or later he and his family would somehow be resurrected and live together again in the mansion. So he made sure that, at the moment of resurrection, so to speak, none of them would be left hungry. The man left $50,000, which by the end of the 19th century was quite a decent sum, in a fund that was supposed to support the functioning of his mansion. This included servants whose task was to serve dinner to the entire family every evening in anticipation of their return from the other world. I think that's a bit creepy. Maybe not even a bit, it's very creepy. Personally, I wouldn't want to work in that house. Besides, all of this went on for a whole 59 years. Imagine, dinner is served on the table every evening. It likely would have stayed that way. But in 1950, it all came to an end. Well, more precisely, the money ran out, and the Bauman family still hadn't appeared during that time. Do you think the servants themselves ate what they cooked? But if the family didn't show up for 59 years and they cooked every day, then what happened to the food, really? In any case, I hope Bauman was reunited with his family, wherever it was, however it happened. Because true love, that's how it is. By the way, about that. Maybe you've heard something about the American actor and comedian Jack Benny? He was a very famous guy in his time. He had a huge number of performances on radio and television. Without a doubt, he deserved his star on the Walk of Fame. Actually, he has 3 of them. And he left a significant mark on American pop culture. By the way, Benny Hill might also be worth mentioning. Let me know in the comments. Well, anyway, he took his stage name specifically in honor of Jack Benny. The comedian died in his 80s in 1974, leaving his wife alone, but not without his attention. As strange as it may sound, among other things in his will, Jack left the following instruction. Every day after his death, Mary Livingston, his wife, was to receive a single red rose until the end of her life. Yes, it's very romantic, but I think what's important is what kind of relationship the couple actually had. So it's a completely different thing when, for example, you're 20, you're head over heels in love with someone you've been dating for a couple of months, and then, God forbid, the worst happens to you. You die. But you thoughtfully leave a will so that every day your girlfriend or boyfriend, insert your own option here, for the next 60, 70 years receives, well, maybe not a rose because you're a poor 20-year-old student, but for example, a rose sticker and telegram from your name. The modern world means modern solutions. Moreover, most likely your earthly love will find someone else, which is logical since he or she is only 20 and needs to keep living. So this person already has new relationships. Maybe not new, maybe 40 years have passed, maybe their children have their own kids. But every day you keep reminding them about yourself. KZ, is it still romantic in this context? Or is it already naive and a bit selfish? You don't know how the person feels about it and you can't change anything anymore. So I think that not only the act itself is important, but also the context. What do you think? Write in the comments. In any case, our hero Jack Benny was already 80 at the time of his death. And together with his wife, they lived not just a few months, but a long 50 years. Love, as they say, is tested by time.
After my husband passed away, the florist delivered a single long-stemmed red rose to my home every day.
Mary Livingston received her last rose 9 years after her husband's death, on June 30th, 1983. Everything happened according to his will. She received flowers until the very end. For some, the end is not the end. About that. Do you know what an auto icon is? For example, I didn't know before working on this episode. My first association was probably with those icons that minibus drivers stick on their dashboard, but it's something completely different. Jeremy Bentham lived at the turn of the 18th and 19th centuries. The guy, by the way, was from London, but he lived in Ukraine for a couple of years. Bentham was known as the founder of utilitarianism during his life. However, after his death in 1832, he probably became even more famous. At that time, it was not easy to obtain bodies for medical education. So first of all, Jeremy bequeathed his body to his friend, Dr. Thomas Smith. Jeremy really wanted the research on his body to benefit science and humanity as a whole. But his will does not end there. A year before his death, Bentham wrote a brochure called Auto Icon, where he explained how to actually become your own icon. It sounds a bit strange, but we're just getting to the second part of Jeremy's will, from which it will become clear what this is and how to become one. Jeremy Bentham ordered that after all necessary experiments with his body were completed, his skeleton and mummified head should be dressed in the clothes the philosopher wore during his life, stuffed with straw, and placed in his usual pose in a place where anyone who wished could come and look at him. So these are the 1830s. More straw, come on. By the way, Bentham's head wasn't mummified very well, so eventually a wax version of it appeared instead, but with the philosopher's real hair. But the clothes and the skeleton, as they say, are legit. Well, that's actually what an auto icon is. In 1850, it was acquired by University College London, and since 2020, it has been displayed in a showcase near the entrance to the college's student center. So yes, you can actually see it even now, and you don't even have to go to England because there's a website where you can view Jeremy from all sides in all his glory. I shared the uncensored photo and link on Telegram as YouTube restricts this type of content. Subscribe to see it there. By the way, speaking of dislike, wills and last testaments are often associated with something good by many of us. When a person, even after their own death, wants to somehow help their loved ones and relatives. But the truth is that people, just like the relationships between them, can be very different. 1932 London Sutton. 59, a woman named Annie Langerbeer died, whom we might not have remembered in Ukraine after 90 years if it weren't for her will to her son-in-law Danielle Johnson, in which she left a rather modest sum, 2 shillings and 6 pence. Yes, one might think that this was all the woman had. She was simply giving away what she owned, and there was nothing unusual about it. But the matter is completely different. The will stated that this amount was necessary so that the son-in-law would have the opportunity to buy himself a rope and with its help, let's say, cease to exist while being in an elevated state. That happens too. However, I still like the idea of leaving something good, bright, and something that can't be spent on a rope after I'm gone. My videos, for instance, will remain watchable even after I'm gone someday. By the way, if you like what I do, if you like this video, share it with your friends on TikTok, Telegram, or wherever you want. It's not YouTubers who create trends, it's you. So, any of your activity, like comment, share, is very important. Very. And if you want to see new episodes on my channel more often, it's also in your power to help me expand the team of those who work on them, who create this content. Right now, I practically do everything myself. Scripts, filming, editing, motion graphics, and so on. However, I order illustrations separately. That is, what you see isn't taken from the internet, but ordered by me, so you can see something absolutely unique and beautiful instead of the same old copied stuff you've seen a dozen times. I also rent costumes and equipment for filming, though my gear isn't top-notch yet. Oh my god! Content is costly, but as mentioned earlier, it's also my legacy, so it's worth investing in. Plus, I think it's important that we watch our own not just because it's ours, but also because it's just an amazingly well done job that doesn't need any explanation as to why it should be watched. If we persist, Ukrainian YouTube will one day be globally admired. We still need to work on it, but currently my video creation is only limited by resources and the team. So only after you've donated to the armed forces of Ukraine and paid all your bills, support your favorite creator with a Shrivnia. Rest assured, it will be instantly converted into the creation of a new episode. It directly depends on you how quickly it will come out and how high quality it will be. Let me know if you're still here. If you've watched up to now, you're incredible. I appreciate you a lot. But that's all for today. This was Sasha on the Blogmaster channel. I'm off to make new videos.